Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're tackling something that affects all of us in the digital age. Cybercrime.
Right.
And we're not just skimming the surface here.
Yeah.
We've got research articles, the whole works, to really understand how this landscape is evolving.
Yeah.
From those annoying spam emails to the stuff that could disrupt entire governments.
What's interesting is how interconnected it all is.
Right.
What might seem like a petty scam, like a phishing attempt, could actually be the first step in a much larger, more complex attack.
Okay, so let's map out this terrain.
Yeah.
We've got a ton of material here.
I know, right?
Where should we even begin?
Well, one thing that stood out to me is the sheer variety of cybercrime out there.
Yeah.
It's not just about stealing credit card numbers anymore. We're talking about things like ransomware, where your entire digital life could be held hostage.
Ransomware, that's the one where they encrypt all your files and demand payment to unlock them, right? I remember reading about a hospital that was hit by ransomware and they had to cancel surgeries.
Oh, wow.
And divert ambulances because their systems were down.
Oh, man.
Talk about a nightmare scenario.
Absolutely. And it's not just hospitals.
Yeah.
It's businesses, government agencies, even individuals.
Yeah.
It's become a billion-dollar industry.
Wow.
And what's really disturbing is that even if you pay the ransom, there's no guarantee you'll actually get your data back.
So they take your money and potentially still leave you with a bunch of unusable files.
Yep.
That's just adding insult to injury.
I know.
Makes you wonder what kind of person would do something like that.
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The psychology behind these attacks is fascinating.
Yeah.
They're preying on fear and desperation. They know that people are willing to pay a lot to get their data back, especially if it's sensitive or irreplaceable.
It's almost like a digital kidnapping.
Right.
You're right. The psychology behind it is chilling.
It is.
Okay, so ransomware is obviously a major threat.
Yeah.
But what about the more everyday types of cybercrime?
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about those phishing emails we all get.
Yeah.
Or fake online shopping sites.
Right. Those are still prevalent, and they can be surprisingly sophisticated.
Oh, really?
Phishing, for example, isn't just about sending out mass emails anymore.
Okay.
We're seeing a rise in spear phishing, where attackers target specific individuals
Interesting.
with highly personalized messages that use stolen personal information to appear more legitimate.
So they're doing their homework.
Yeah.
Making these emails seem like they're from someone you know or a company you trust. That's scary because it makes it so much harder to tell what's real and what's fake.
Exactly. And once they have that initial foothold,
Right.
they can launch further attacks.
Oh, wow.
For example, they might use the information gathered through phishing to craft a more convincing social engineering attack.
Social engineering, that's the one where they manipulate people into giving up information or access, right?
Yeah.
Like those phone scams where someone pretends to be from your bank or the IRS.
That's a classic example.
Right.
But social engineering can take many forms.
Oh.
It could be a seemingly harmless message on social media that leads you to a fake website,
Oh, gosh.
or a cleverly worded email that tricks you into downloading malware.
Malware, that's another big one.
Yeah.
The sources really go in depth on the different types.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've all heard of spyware, but what about these Trojan horses?
Yeah.
What makes them so dangerous?
Think of a Trojan horse as a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Okay.
It disguises itself as something legitimate, like a software update or a game. But once you download it, it unleashes its malicious payload.
Oh, wow.
This could be anything from stealing your data to giving the attacker remote control of your device.
So it's like inviting the enemy right into your digital home.
Pretty much.
That's terrifying. And they're constantly evolving too, right?
Oh, yeah.
I remember reading about a Trojan horse that was disguised as a COVID-19 contact tracing app. Talk about exploiting people's fears.
That's precisely what they do.
Right.
They prey on our vulnerabilities, whether it's fear, greed, or simply our desire to be helpful.
It's a constant cat and mouse game, isn't it?
It is.
The criminals come up with new tactics and security experts are scrambling to catch up.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the sources also talk about these distributed denial of service attacks or DDoS attacks.
Right.
Those sound pretty serious.
They can be incredibly disruptive.
Yeah.
Imagine a flood of traffic overwhelming a website,
Oh, gosh.
causing it to crash and become unavailable to legitimate users.
Right?
That's essentially what a DDoS attack does.
So it's like a digital traffic jam, but instead of cars, it's malicious requests bombarding a website.
Exactly.
The sources mention something called botnets in relation to these attacks.
Uh-huh.
What are those?
A botnet is a network of infected computers often unknowingly controlled by the attacker.
Wow.
These zombie computers can be used to launch large-scale DDoS attacks, amplifying their power and making them even more difficult to defend against.
So it's like an army of digital soldiers all working together to take down a target.
That's a good way to put it.
That's pretty sophisticated stuff.
It is.
The sources also mention that these DDoS attacks can be used as a smokescreen for other types of cybercrime.
Absolutely.
So while everyone is focused on trying to get the website back online, the attackers might be busy stealing data or planting malware in the background.
Right.
It's a distraction tactic, creating chaos to cover their tracks.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a scene from a heist movie where they set off a fire alarm to distract security while they rob the vault.
Exactly.
Clever, but incredibly devious.
Yeah.
And it's not just websites that are vulnerable, right?
Nope.
We've also got all this talk about data breaches, where hackers gain unauthorized access to sensitive information.
Right.
Seems like every other week we hear about another company or organization getting hacked.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Yeah.
Data breaches have become a regular occurrence, and the consequences can be devastating.
Right.
We're talking about the loss of personal information, financial records, intellectual property, you name it.
Yeah.
And this stolen data can be used for identity theft, blackmail, or sold on the dark web for a hefty profit.
It's like a digital gold rush for criminals.
It is.
But it's not just about the financial impact, is it?
No.
I imagine the emotional toll on victims can be just as significant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine the feeling of violation and vulnerability when you realize that your personal information has been compromised.
Right.
It can be incredibly stressful and unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
And for businesses, the reputational damage can be just as damaging as any financial losses.
It's a stark reminder that in the digital age, our data is a valuable commodity.
Yeah.
And we need to be vigilant about protecting it.
Absolutely.
But before we delve into the ways we can safeguard ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to understand the full spectrum of cybercrime.
Okay.
We've covered some of the more technical attacks, but the sources also highlight some truly heartbreaking scams,
Yeah.
like online romance scams.
Romance scams are particularly insidious because they prey on people's emotions.
Right.
The scammer cultivates a relationship with the victim, often over a long period of time,
Mm-hmm.
gaining their trust and affection before eventually asking for money.
It's like a digital version of the classic con artist playing on people's vulnerabilities and loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading a story about a woman who lost her life savings to a romance scammer.
Wow.
It's a powerful reminder that these scams can have devastating consequences, both financially and emotionally.
Absolutely. And these scams are becoming increasingly sophisticated.
Oh, really?
The scammers are using social media dating apps and even video calls
Wow.
to create a sense of authenticity and connection with their victims.
It's almost like they're creating a whole alternate persona designed to perfectly match what the victim is looking for.
Exactly.
That's incredibly manipulative.
It is.
The sources also touch on online auction fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Is that basically just a case of getting what you didn't pay for?
It can be as simple as that, but there are also more elaborate schemes.
Oh, okay.
For example, a scammer might create a fake auction listing for a high-value item,
Uh-huh.
then disappear with the winning bidder's money.
Right.
Or they might sell counterfeit goods, passing them off as genuine.
It's the digital equivalent of a bait and switch, isn't it?
Pretty much.
You think you're getting a great deal, but you end up with nothing but a lighter wallet and a sense of betrayal.
Yeah.
It's clear that cybercrime is constantly evolving, finding new and creative ways to exploit our trust and our vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't even touched on the rise of cryptocurrency fraud.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we could do a whole deep dive just on that.
We certainly could.
Right.
The relative anonymity of cryptocurrencies, coupled with their increasing popularity, has made them a prime target for criminals.
Wow.
We're seeing everything from Ponzi schemes to fake exchanges
Gosh.
to elaborate pump and dump schemes designed to manipulate the market.
It's like the Wild West out there with all these new opportunities for both legitimate investment and criminal activity.
It is.
But we'll save that discussion for another deep dive.
Right.
For now, let's shift gears and talk about cyber espionage.
Okay.
I always associate that with spies and government secrets, but the sources suggest it's a much broader issue.
You're right. Cyber espionage is no longer confined to the world of nation-states.
Interesting.
We're seeing criminal organizations, hacktivists, and even individuals engaging in cyber espionage for various motives.
Really?
From financial gain to political influence.
So it's about stealing information, but not necessarily for financial gain.
Exactly.
It could be about gaining a competitive advantage, disrupting operations, or even just causing chaos.
Right.
Ow.
And the methods they use are constantly evolving, from sophisticated malware that can steal data undetected to social engineering techniques that trick people into revealing confidential information.
Gosh.
It's a constant arms race between attackers and defenders.
Speaking of attackers, we haven't talked about one of the more insidious forms of cybercrime. Fake antivirus software, or scareware, as it's sometimes called.
Right.
I remember falling for one of those pop-ups years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It was so convincing. I actually paid for the fake software.
Don't feel bad. Those pop-ups are designed to be alarming and manipulative.
Right.
Scareware preys on people's fear of viruses and malware.
Yeah.
Bombarding them with warnings about non-existent threats and then offering a solution they're bogus software.
So you're basically paying to infect your computer with more malware.
Pretty much. It's cruel and ironic all at the same time.
Yeah.
It seems like cybercrime is a hydra. For every head you cut off, 2 more grow back.
Right.
It can feel overwhelming, to be honest.
It's certainly a challenging landscape.
It is.
But the good news is that there are steps we can take to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
We'll explore those in detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Great, because I'm ready to shift from feeling overwhelmed to feeling empowered.
Yes. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back after a quick break.
All right. Actually, scratch that. No break needed.
Okay.
Let's just jump right into part 2.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about how we can actually fight back against this digital onslaught.
Okay.
Because it's not just about understanding the threats. It's about equipping ourselves with the knowledge and tools to protect ourselves.
Exactly. We've explored the dark side. Now, let's shine some light on the solutions.
Right.
Where do we even begin? It feels like a daunting task with all these different angles of attack.
Well, the good news is that a lot of it comes down to basic cyber hygiene. Things we should all be doing anyway.
Right.
But maybe need a little reminder about, for example, let's talk about passwords.
Oh, the dreaded password lecture.
I know, right?
I have to admit, I'm guilty of using the same password for multiple accounts.
Uh-oh.
Is that really that big of a deal?
It's a bigger deal than you might think. I
You may say.
imagine this, one of your accounts gets compromised. Maybe a less secure website you signed up for years ago.
Right. Now, if you've used that same password everywhere, it's like handing the keys to your entire digital life to the attacker.
Okay, that paints a pretty vivid picture.
Right.
So what's the solution? Do I need to come up with a unique, super complex password for every single website and app I use?
Well,
That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
it doesn't have to be that complicated. Password managers are a lifesaver.
Okay.
They generate and store strong, unique passwords for you.
Uh-huh.
So you only have to remember one master password to access them all.
That sounds much more manageable. So strong passwords check.
There you go.
What else? The sources also talk about being wary of emails and links.
Right.
But honestly, some of these phishing emails are so convincing, it's hard to tell what's legitimate.
Yeah.
Any tips for spotting a fake?
Absolutely. First, always check the sender's email address.
Okay.
Does it actually match the company or person it claims to be from?
Right.
Look for misspellings or grammatical errors.
Yeah.
Those are often red flags.
Good point.
And never click on a link directly from an email.
Instead, hover your mouse over the link to see the actual URL. If it looks suspicious, don't click it.
So it's about being a little bit skeptical, a little bit paranoid. Trust but verify, as they say.
Exactly. It's better to err on the side of caution.
Right.
And speaking of caution, let's talk about software updates.
Ooh, software updates.
I know.
They always seem to come at the worst possible time, right? When you're in the middle of something important.
Yeah.
But you're saying I shouldn't just ignore them?
Definitely not. Those updates often include security patches that fix vulnerabilities hackers could exploit.
Okay.
Think of it like locking your doors and windows. You wouldn't leave them open, would you?
Good point. I guess I need to prioritize those updates, even if it means a little disruption to my workflow.
Right.
What else can we do to shore up our defenses? The sources mention financial account monitoring. Is that something we should be doing regularly?
Absolutely. Regularly check your bank and credit card statements for any unauthorized transactions. Look for anything that seems out of place, even small amounts.
Right.
Many financial institutions offer fraud monitoring services which can alert you to suspicious activity in real time.
That's good to know. It's like having an extra set of eyes watching over your accounts.
Exactly.
The sources also talk about the importance of cybercrime education.
What does that entail exactly?
Well,
Do I need to become a cybersecurity expert overnight?
not at all. It's about staying informed about the latest scams and cybercrime trends.
Okay.
Read articles, follow reputable security blogs.
Mm-hmm.
Even just be aware of the common tactics criminals use.
Right.
The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to spot potential threats.
Knowledge is power, as they say. And speaking of power, let's talk about secure websites.
Okay.
How can I tell if a website is safe to use, especially when I'm sharing personal information like credit card details?
Look for the HTTPS in the URL and the padlock symbol in the address bar.
Okay.
This indicates that the website uses encryption to protect your data as it travels between your browser and the website server.
Think of it like a digital seal of approval.
For no padlock, no shopping.
That's a good rule of thumb,
Okay.
especially when it comes to websites handling sensitive information.
Right.
And be wary of websites with strange URLs or misspellings. Those can be red flags as well.
Got it. HTTPS padlock. Double check the URL. It's like a checklist for online safety.
Exactly.
But what happens if, despite all our precautions, we do become a victim of cybercrime?
Right.
The sources say something about reporting the incident. Who do we report it to?
That depends on the type of crime. For identity theft, you'd contact the Federal Trade Commission,
Okay.
the FTC.
Right.
For other types of cybercrime, you can report it to your local police
Mm-hmm.
or a national cybercrime agency like the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center.
Okay, the IC3.
Exactly.
So don't just suffer in silence report.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to take action, not just for ourselves,
Right.
but to help authorities track these criminals and prevent future attacks.
Exactly. Reporting cybercrime helps paint a clearer picture of the threat landscape, allowing law enforcement and security researchers to better understand the tactics being used and develop more effective countermeasures. It's a collective effort.
It's like we're all in this together, fighting back against the digital bad guys.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from understanding the threats to implementing protective measures.
We have.
But I still have this nagging feeling that it's a never-ending battle. As soon as we catch up with the latest threats, the criminals are already one step ahead.
That's true. Cybercrime is constantly evolving, but the same can be said for cybersecurity.
Okay.
New technologies and techniques are being developed all the time to combat these threats.
Right.
It's an arms race, but we're not powerless.
So it's about staying vigilant, staying informed, and adapting our defenses as the threat landscape changes. Sounds like a lot of work.
It's definitely an ongoing effort, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Think of it like maintaining your physical health.
Okay.
You eat right, you exercise, you get regular checkups. Cybersecurity is similar. You implement basic protective measures, you stay informed about the latest threats, and you seek help when you need it.
That's a good analogy. It makes cybersecurity feel less like a chore and more like a necessary part of living a healthy digital life.
Exactly.
But even with all the tools and knowledge at our disposal, it feels like there's still an element of luck involved.
Yeah.
Like you can do everything right and still become a victim.
There's always an element of risk, just like in the physical world. You
Yeah.
can lock your doors and windows, but there's always a chance that someone could break in.
Yeah.
The goal isn't to eliminate risk entirely, but to minimize it as much as possible.
So it's about being proactive, not reactive.
Yeah.
Taking control of our own digital safety and not just leaving it up to chance.
Exactly. Empowerment is key. The more you understand about the threats and the tools available to you, the less likely you are to become a victim.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. I feel like I've gone through a crash course in cybercrime and cybersecurity all in one.
I'm glad to hear that.
But one thing that's been lingering in my mind is the impact on victims. We talked about the financial and emotional consequences, but are there any legal ramifications?
There can be, depending on the situation.
Okay.
For businesses, failing to adequately protect customer data can result in lawsuits and regulatory fines.
Wow.
For individuals, if you're found to be negligent in protecting your own data, it could affect things like insurance claims or even legal proceedings.
So it's not just about protecting ourselves from criminals, it's also about protecting ourselves from legal liability.
Right.
That adds another layer of complexity to the whole issue.
It does, but it also underscores the importance of taking cybersecurity seriously. It's not just a technical issue.
Right.
It's a legal one, a financial one, and a personal one.
It's woven into the fabric of our lives in the digital age.
It is.
Okay, we've talked about the threats, the defenses, the impact, and the legal ramifications. I'm feeling informed, but I'm also feeling the weight of responsibility.
Yeah.
What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I would say this cybercrime is a serious threat, but it's not insurmountable. Knowledge is power.
Right.
The more you understand about the risks and the steps you can take to mitigate them, the better equipped you'll be to navigate the digital world safely and confidently.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, seek help when you need it, and remember that you're not alone in this fight.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that while we need to be vigilant, we don't have to live in fear.
Exactly.
Okay, folks, we're nearing the end of our deep dive into the world of cybercrime.
Right.
It's been a journey, to say the least, we've explored. The dark corners shed light on the solutions, and hopefully empowered you to take control of your own digital safety. It really has been a deep dive, hasn't it?
It has.
And I think it's fair to say that the conversation around cybercrime often focuses on individuals and businesses.
Yeah, that's true, but
Yeah.
we can't forget about the role of governments and law enforcement in this whole equation.
Right, because cybercrime doesn't respect borders, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It's a global issue that requires a global response.
Exactly. And it's a complex challenge for law enforcement agencies.
Yeah.
Cyber criminals can operate from anywhere in the world,
Right.
making it difficult to track them down and bring them to justice.
Like trying to catch a ghost?
In some ways, yes, but it's not impossible.
Right.
Law enforcement agencies are increasingly collaborating across borders, sharing information and resources to combat cybercrime.
Right.
And new technologies are being developed to help track down criminals and gather evidence.
So there's hope for the future?
Absolutely. But it's a collective effort.
Right.
Governments, law enforcement, businesses, and individuals all have a role to play in creating a safer online environment.
It's like a digital neighborhood. Watch everyone looking out for each other and reporting suspicious activity.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And it's not just about reporting crime.
Right.
It's also about promoting awareness and education. The more people understand about the risks and how to protect themselves, the less likely they are to become victims.
So it's about empowering individuals to take control of their own digital safety.
Exactly. And that's where I think we need to shift the conversation.
Okay.
Instead of focusing solely on fear and the latest threats,
Right.
let's also highlight the positive steps people can take to protect themselves. Let's celebrate the successes, the innovations, and the people who are working tirelessly to make the online world a safer place.
I love that it's about finding the balance between vigilance and optimism.
Precisely, we need to acknowledge the risks, but we also need to remember that we're not powerless.
Right.
There are things we can do individually and collectively to combat cybercrime and create a more secure digital future.
That's an inspiring message to end on. So to our listeners, we say,
Yes.
stay informed, stay vigilant, but don't let fear paralyze you. You take action, empower yourselves, and remember that we're all in this together.
Well said. And if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's this: knowledge is power. The more you understand about the world of cybercrime, the better equipped you'll be to navigate it safely and confidently.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our cybercrime deep dive.
Yes.
It's been a fascinating,
You'd
if somewhat unsettling journey.
Right.
But I think we've all come away with a better understanding of the threats, the solutions, and the importance of taking an active role in our own digital security.
Indeed, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to continue exploring this topic and to share their knowledge with others, because ultimately the more we talk about these issues, the more we can do to combat them.
So keep learning, keep sharing, and stay safe out there in the digital world. Until next time, happy deep diving.